Welcome everyone. This is a pre-recorded video for my presentation, Timing and Durations of Employing Live-in Foreign Domestic Helpers Among Hong Kong Families. My name is Adam Cheung from Hong Kong Baptist University. The background of this research is built upon the phenomenon of domestic outsourcing. Because of the rising female labor force participation rate, more women are going out to the labor market. But at the same time, the traditional household division of labor persists, that women are continuing to be primarily responsible for the household labor. So this gives rise to work-family conflict for many dual-earner couples, especially for the working women. So upon this background, a lot of dual-earning couples are trying to outsource domestic labors to the service economy. And employing live-in foreign domestic helpers (FDH) is an important feature for families in many advanced economies, especially in Hong Kong and in Singapore. If we look at the past few decades, what we find is that there is a significant rise of employing live-in foreign domestic helpers in Hong Kong and Singapore in the last few decades. And how could we understand this phenomenon? I'm going trying to conceptualize this phenomenon as an option of domestic outsourcing. So to understand the rise of live-in domestic help in Hong Kong, I am trying to adopt the domestic outsourcing framework. In these literatures, usually past studies summarize three sets of factors that are mostly significant in predicting the couple's outsourcing domestic labor. First, need-based factor. So number of children, age of youngest child, employment status of the couples, living with parents or in-laws. This would determine whether the couples need to outsource domestic labor. The heavier the family burden, the more likely the couples to outsource the domestic labor to the service economy. The second set of factors are resource-based factor. Education, income, wealth. So the wealthier the family, the higher income the couples have, the more likely they can outsource domestic labor to the service economy. And the last set of factors is the willingness-based factor. So not only the couples with heavy family burden or with a lot of resources will outsource, only when these couples are willing to outsource will outsource domestic labor. So attitudes towards domestic outsourcing and gender attitudes are also found to be associated with domestic outsourcing. However, there are research gaps in the literatures. One of the most important research gaps is that most past studies are based on cross-sectional data. So what they are essentially studying is the prevalence rate, whether the couples use or not use domestic helpers at a given time point. However, domestic outsourcing is not just a one-off decision, but a continuous practice. So every single day, couples have to ask whether they should keep using domestic outsourcing as a practice. So the question when to start and when to end are actually two mechanisms to determine the prevalence rate. However, no past studies have yet examined domestic outsourcing from an event history perspective. Therefore, we do not know whether the mechanisms of domestic outsourcing are equally applicable, explaining the timing to start and to end domestic outsourcing. So the research objective of this study is to compare the risks in experiencing two different events. The first event is to start employing foreign domestic helpers. The second event is for those who have already started employed foreign domestic helpers, when are they going to stop employing foreign domestic helpers? This study is among the first to adopt an event history analysis approach to study the factors of starting and ending the use of live-in helpers. To do so, I am drawing data from a representative household survey collected between 2018 and 2019. The total sample size for this study is 2,003 households. And in the survey, I collected retrospective event history data, yearly records of hiring foreign domestic helpers among married couples in Hong Kong. I employed two sets of models, two sets of discrete time logic models. The first set of model is to explore the factors of transition into employing foreign domestic helpers. The second set of model are transition into the end of outsourcing. So I put the same sets of need-based, resource-based, and willingness-based factors in the two sets of models. In this chart, you can see very clearly that the percentage of married couples employing live-in domestic helpers increased remarkably from 1990s to 2010s. The prevalence rate of hiring domestic helpers has increased almost sevenfold over the period. So using discrete time logic models, I'm trying to disentangle the risk of entering the practice by cohort. And you can see that the recent marriage cohort are much more likely to outsource domestic labor compared to the older marriage cohort. For people who married after 2010, you can see that almost 1/3 of them are going to hire a foreign domestic helpers within the first 10 years. And what we add to the literature is that we find out the risk of stopping the practice is actually quite low for people who married after 1990s. Almost 50% of the couples married after 1990s, they will not end the practice within the first 10 years. So this nice is trying to summarize the findings from the two sets of discrete time logic models. Because of time, I cannot go to each factor one by one, but what we can clearly see that the factors affecting the entrance model and exit model are different. And entrance model are mostly affected by the need-based factor and the willingness-based factor. So who lead to outsource domestic labor and who are willing to outsource domestic labor, they are going to start employing foreign domestic helpers in the early days. But for the exit model, you can see that willingness-based factors plays no role here, and the risk of exit is mostly determined by the couple's income, wealth, and the age of the youngest child. So to conclude, what this study found out is that the rising prevalence of employing live-in foreign domestic helpers in Hong Kong is mainly because of the increasing risk of entrance, but not the decreasing risk of exit over time. Second, what we found out is that employing live-in foreign domestic helpers in Hong Kong is a durable practice that can last for more than 10 years for most couples. And the findings from the entrance model show that both need-based and willingness-based factors plus wealth are important factors. So couples in need and who are willing to outsource will outsource. Yet, exit model shows us that mostly need-based factor and resource-based factor are significant. Willingness-based factors plays no role here. So couples who have resources and need will start outsourcing, and then only when this need fade away and when the couples is in little resources, they will exit the practice earlier. This study adds to the theoretical literatures by separating the prevalence of outsourcing domestic labors into two separate events, entrance and exit. So future studies should be aware of the difference between the separate events, the impact of separate events in shaping the risk of domestic outsourcing. So that's all for my presentation today. Thank you very much.